California Earthquake Authority. And allow me just a 30-second lead in to explain why we're here. We know that earthquakes happen every day, whether they're...
You guys grab that mic, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Whether it's in California or around the world. And we also know from research and what the social scientists are telling us that most people turn to one place right away to find out information about earthquakes, and that's TV news. So with that in mind, we wanted to arm you with accurate information because we have seen examples, not here, but we have seen examples of incorrect information being shown or being shared. And one quick example is a couple of years ago when the earthquake hit in Virginia, there was an East Coast anchor being interviewed by a California anchor, and the East Coast anchor said something like, "Oh, we know all you guys in California were laughing at us because we did everything wrong. We ran outside, and now we know we're supposed to get in the doorway, stand in a doorway." And the California anchor said, "Yes, that's right. That's exactly what you're supposed to do," and that's completely incorrect and potentially life-threatening. So with that in mind, we wanted to arm you with that accurate information. I have 30 years of experience in TV news at KCRA, so we hoped with my experience and these guys' expertise, we could leave you with some really accurate, good, helpful information to share with your viewers. So with that, we hope to keep you no more than 30 minutes. We'll talk, we'll leave some time for Q&A, and we have some leave-behinds that we hope you'll find helpful. So let me introduce who we have here. We have Glenn Pomeroy on the end. He's the CEO of the California Earthquake Authority. We have Rob Dudgeon, Deputy Director, City and County of San Francisco Department of Emergency Management. We have Jack Boatwright, Research Geophysicist with USGS. And we have Emily White, Director of Community Preparedness with American Red Cross. And I think the person who's going to start us off is Mr. Boatwright.
Well, thank you very much. The place to start off, we all know, you know better than we do, that California is earthquake country. Northern California is earthquake country. There are a couple of points that I'd like to bring out with regard to that. The history of large earthquakes in Northern California really goes back to 1868 with an earthquake in the East Bay that's called the Hayward earthquake. It's around a magnitude 6.8. 6.9. Then we had the 1906, which everybody refers to as the big one, and I'm happy to allow that to continue. And then in a little more than 20 years ago, we had the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. And Loma Prieta earthquake is just about the size of that we think the Hayward Fault earthquake was. Now, in terms of earthquake risk in the Bay Area, the San Andreas is the plate boundary. But the reason that so many people live in the Bay Area is because the strain in this part of the fault is diffused across three different major faults: the San Andreas, the Hayward-Rogers Creek, and the Concord-Green Valley Fault. And in fact, what that means is there's a higher hazard of large earthquakes in the East Bay right now than there is along the San Andreas in the West Bay. So the first thing to kind of warn you about is we will have large earthquakes in the East Bay, and they won't be a surprise. Okay, it's not that everything should be happening on the San Andreas Fault. Our best estimate of the recurrence time for a 1906 type earthquake is 200 years, and we're only 100 years since 1906. Okay, so that being said, as the beginning here, why don't you pop that? In terms of news, media, and I'm not saying that you need to put these maps up. I'm saying they're very worth looking at. This is a shake map, and what it does is we post them from 5 to 10 minutes after the earthquake occurs. They're driven by ground motion that's recorded in and around the earthquake, and if you can understand them, they tell you in one glimpse how big the earthquake is. And I apologize, I only have a relatively small shake map here. This is for a magnitude 4.5 earthquake down near San Juan Bautista. But the point is, the intensity scale that you see on the side there, when you see yellow, that's where you start to see earthquake effects. In the yellow, you get damage to weak masonry buildings, a cracking of chimneys. You have things thrown off of shelves. So a liquor store, for example, might have a lot of damage there. There'll be stuff thrown off. As you go into higher intensities, it's not until that's intensity 6. Intensity 7 is associated with breaking chimneys. Intensity 8 starts to be associated with damage to structures. Okay? But the main thing is, when you look at one of these maps, you can see if you expect damage just by the color and how extensive it is. The other map that is worthwhile looking at, possibly, but I would put the shake map well before this, is a map called Did You Feel It? This is a Did You Feel It map for the same earthquake. Did You Feel It takes a little bit longer to develop because it is the responses from general people, from public, as to what they felt as it's put on the internet. So a Did You Feel It map will take 20 minutes to a half an hour to an hour or more to develop. So really the shake map is our first line of information about large earthquakes, how strongly they were felt, and what you can, as a news outlet, say what the affected area is. If we go back to the shake map, the colored area is where the event was felt. Again, and as you go up in color to yellow is where you first get effects, and then you get more and more damage as you go into, which I don't have on this map, and I apologize, you go into orange and red. So, and the way...
This is on the USGS site?
The way to get to the shake map very simply is just Google shake map or Google CISN shake map. And there'll be a choice of, if you Google just shake map, there's a choice of a number of different regions. If you Google CISN, there's a choice of Northern and Southern California. Okay?
Thank you.
So, and then a couple of other points that some of my colleagues are concerned about. I'm a little less concerned about actual terminology. With regard to describing the size of an earthquake, we would like you to use earthquake magnitude rather than Richter magnitude. The difficulty with that is no seismologist now is actually calculating a Richter magnitude. They were calculated off of a set of instruments that we no longer run. So we can't even, it takes a great deal of work to actually reconstitute what a record would look like through such an instrument and then calculate the magnitude. The earthquake magnitude is off of a scale which we call the moment magnitude scale, but you can just call it the earthquake magnitude. It was made to correspond as closely as possible to the Richter magnitude over a limited range, but the magnitude, they're not really Richter magnitudes. I realize that a lot of the news media like the Richter magnitude scale. For me, that's not that enormous a point, but if you could do that. And let's see, is there another point? The only other question would be, or the other point that I'd like to talk about is an earthquake, a fault, is actually a 3D crack through the earth, through the crust of the earth usually. A fault line is the expression of that fault on the surface of the earth. But if we're describing an earthquake, We usually call it a rupture or a fault rupture, and that's the section of the fault which slipped in the earthquake, and then its expression on the surface of the earth is a fault scarp. But these are all kind of, sort of terminology, and I don't think anybody gets really misled by that, those points. I've probably missed a couple of things I'm supposed to hector you about.
Does the new scale have similar numeric range as the Richter scale?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, the Richter scale, one of the reasons we changed it was the Richter scale saturated at about intensity 6, which means you couldn't get greater than intensity 6 on the Richter scale, whereas, as we could see from the Tohoku earthquake and so forth, we get all the way up to intensity 9 and beyond that now, and the Richter scale couldn't manage that. One other point to talk about the earthquake magnitude, it's really a measure of the amount of work done by the earthquake, the amount of energy that it releases. But as you go to larger and larger earthquakes, yes, it's releasing a lot of energy, but the energy is shifted down to lower and lower frequencies. So it doesn't mean, it might mean that the area affected is larger, but the shaking next to the fault actually starts to saturate. And that, I guess that brings me to the last point. And actually, I think that from what I've seen of the news media, everybody's sort of hip to this. The earthquake epicenter is only where is this point on the surface of the earth above where the earthquake started, but it is not the place where the ground motion is probably the strongest, particularly for these large earthquakes. So with that, I will hand over.
Is there any aspect of earthquakes that we generally don't report on that we're missing?
I don't think so. I think you do a pretty good